Apologies in advance, as this video contains a large number of French names and I'm probably going to get at least half of them wrong. Nonetheless, in the 1780s, France was pausing to gather breath. Starting out the decade with helping the British 13 colonies break away to form the USA had been fun, but also massively expensive, and the war had been rounded out by a pair of catastrophic naval defeats that had destroyed or damaged a significant chunk of the French Navy's fighting power. However, the French naval minister took this as a chance to advance France's naval power. Instead of numerous one-offs and small runs of ships, it was decided instead that the French battle line should be built of standardised large combatants which were individually superior to any peer opponent, a policy that many French naval officers a century ahead of in time would no doubt look back on fondly. The chief architect of all of this would be a naval engineer who deserves far more recognition than he gets these days, Jacques-Noël Saint, who, as well as developing plans for numerous classes of standard frigate, would also design the Téméraire class of 74 gunners, the Tonnant class of 80 gunners, and our subject for today, the Océan class first-rate ships of the line. These three classes and their variants would account for no less than 148 ships of the line which would be built for the French Navy over the next few decades. Simply put, the Océan class were monsters. Although three-deck ships of the line, they were actually displacing a fraction more than the floating barn, otherwise known as Nuestra Señora de la Santísima Trinidad, tipping the scales at a hair under 5,100 tons displacement, about 11 to 1,200 tons more than HMS Victory. Despite being ships of the late 18th century instead of the 19th, they showed a number of highly advanced features that would take some time to show up in other navies. They had almost no forecastle, straight lines, and only the absolute necessary amount of poop deck, which helped keep the top weight down and made them very stable gun platforms as well as being steady under sail. Their firepower matched their size, with the initial armament being 32 French 36-pounder guns in the lower gun deck, 34 single 24-pounder guns in the middle gun deck, and a like number of 12-pounders on the upper gun deck. The open decks had a mix of 8-pounder long guns and, on some ships, at least for a while, a small number of 36-pounder Arbusier de Vassieux, a short-barrel brass shell gun that was broadly similar to a carronade, if somewhat less successful. It should be noted that the 36-pounder, at least, was 36 French pounds, or livres, which was actually closer to 39 English pounds, which left these guns as somewhat closer to the 42-pound bronze guns that the Royal Navy had largely discarded by this point as too heavy to work in a seaway, as compared to the 32-pounders that were the standard on most British capital ships at this time, at least on the lower gun decks of larger vessels. Paradoxically, the 24-pounders, at least as far as I can tell, seem to have been exactly the same calibre and therefore shot weight as British equivalents, so go figure. About the only thing that you could mildly criticise about the Océans was speed. They were capable of 10 knots at full sail, which meant they weren't slow, but the fastest first rates did have a knot or two on them. The first two ships were ordered in 1785 and 1786 as the rather oddly named État de Bourgogne and Commerce de Marseille. That's States of Bourgogne and Trade of Marseille, respectively. The latter was finished first, but wouldn't quite see out 3 years of service before she was captured by the Royal Navy in 1793 during the Siege of Toulon, and so the Class tends, somewhat like the New Orleans class of World War II, to take its name from the next ship in the line, which, after a slew of rapid renamings, courtesy of the French Revolution, eventually settled on Océan in 1795. The next three, Dauphin Royal, Majesto, and Vengeur, roughly speaking Prince Royal, Majestic, and Avenger, had far superior names to start with, but this opening batch of 5 in total had mixed luck. Océan and Majesto survived the subsequent wars and would only go out of service with the rise of steam-powered ships of the line, but Dauphin Royal was renamed twice and under its last guise as Orient, caught fire and exploded at the Battle of the Nile after only 5 years of service. Vengeur was also renamed to Impérial, which was a fair trade, I guess, but would only last a total of 2 years before going aground at the Battle of San Domingo and subsequently being captured and burned. These vessels represented the ships of the French Imperial Navy. the Reign of Terror putting an end to production for quite some time, but the design was kept on ice and then brought back in a slightly modified form in the aftermath of the Battle of Trafalgar, with another 11 ships laid down, although Sans Pareil, renamed 3 times on the stocks, was never launched and 2 others were never commissioned. Many of this latter batch also suffered at least one renaming, and varied from their Imperial era predecessors by substituting the 12-pounders on the upper gun deck for heavier 18-pounders, and latterly also introducing on some ships functioning carronades. Some of these latter ships survived most or all of the 19th century, although many were scrapped in the era of steam-powered wooden warships between 1830 and 1860. The Ville de Paris was still around as a barrack ship in 1898, and the Souverain, converted to have an auxiliary steam engine in 1857, was still around in 1905, the year HMS Dreadnought was laid down. Shortly before Trafalgar, an attempt was made to start a class of 110-gun diminutives, the Commerce de Paris class, but only 2 of those ever entered service. A rather wonderful large-scale model of the type resides in the Marseille Naval Museum today.
That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. If you have a comment or suggestion for a ship to review, let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to comment on the pinned post for dry dock questions.